The United States government announcing a diplomatic boycott of Beijing 2022. What does it mean? Will Canada follow suit? To break it all down, I am joined by senior parliamentary reporter David Cochrane. Thank you, David, for joining me. So what exactly is a diplomatic boycott?
Well, it's a way of sending a message to the host country of your disapproval for their conduct. In this case, China. The obvious example with Canada would be the detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. And then there's also the treatment of the Uyghur Muslim minorities inside Chinese territory itself. And it would mean sending no diplomats, no politicians, no dignitaries or VIPs to attend the opening ceremonies of the Olympics and the games themselves. It's not the level of the boycotts we saw in like 1980, when Canada and a bunch of Western nations pulled the athletes out of the Moscow Olympics to protest the Soviet Union invasion of Afghanistan. So the athletes get to go, which is the important thing really for the games, but the politicians and the dignitaries don't go, as a way of sending a message to China that their conduct and behavior is not appropriate, and they won't dignify their behavior by attending a big event for that country.
Have we seen a diplomatic boycott prior to today?
We've seen measures of it or degrees of it in the past, Sochi being the most recent example, where, people like you spoke out against, the Russian and the anti-LGBTQ laws and took a stand against it. And, Stephen Harper didn't attend. Francois Hollande, the president of France at the time, didn't attend. President Barack Obama and Joe Biden didn't attend. And in some ways, rubbed Vladimir Putin's nose in it by sending people like Brian Boitano as part of the official delegation for the U.S. to send a message that gay and lesbian athletes are welcome at these games. That's the most recent and live example of it. And it's interesting that, you flash forward to 8 years later, essentially when the next Olympics is going to happen, we're still dealing with China and Russia as the bad actors on the world stage, with Western and like-minded countries trying to send messages to change their behavior. So Sochi would be the most recent example where we saw elements of that.
Can we expect Canada to follow suit?
I think it's tracking that way. I think they're seeing this, they're taking this very seriously. They're considering this as a real option. They would have ruled it out if they were not. I think they wanted to see what Washington was going to do first. And we saw that with President Biden, with his press secretary, Jen Psaki, making the announcement in the briefing room of the White House saying that they wouldn't go. But Canada, as I understand it, and from talking to senior political officials in this government, they don't want to sort of act independently. If you look at their whole approach of dealing with China throughout the arbitrary detention of the two Michaels, they worked with other like-minded countries to build a coalition, to build critical mass, to show that the world was united in this, in condemning China's actions. And I think they're going to take that sort of approach. I mean, we already know Australia is considering this, the United Kingdom is considering this, and the U.S. has done it. And they're important allies for us, obviously, for a lot of reasons in NATO and in other organizations like the Five Eyes Security Alliance. And I think if you see the momentum happening there, it's quite likely Canada is going to be part of that international movement, because they've been working with groups to condemn what's been happening in China with the treatment of minorities and these sorts of things. So I think there's an impetus and a momentum that came out of the White House announcement on this. And I think the rest of a lot of the other Western nations will follow suit. But it's not done yet. There are two important things happening in the next week or so. There's a summit for democracy that President Biden is hosting virtually out of Washington, where like-minded countries will come together. And the G7 foreign ministers are going to meet in the United Kingdom. And those two things could give this some momentum. We might see some signs of what's going to happen coming out of those.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. David Cochrane. I really appreciate chatting with you.
You got it. Thanks for having me.